She notices it first on a Tuesday evening while they're sitting together on the couch, supposedly watching a movie that neither of them is particularly interested in. She glances over at him and sees his face illuminated by the blue light of his phone screen, and he's smiling, genuinely smiling, laughing even, at something he's reading or watching on that small rectangular device. His teeth are visible, his eyes are crinkled at the corners in that way they get when he's genuinely amused, and there's a lightness in his expression that she hasn't seen directed at her in what feels like months. She tries to remember the last time he smiled at her like that, the last time he laughed at something she said, the last time his face lit up because of something she did. She can't remember. She doesn't say anything in that moment, just watches him for a few more seconds as he continues scrolling and smiling, completely oblivious to the fact that she's studying him like he's a specimen under a microscope. She turns her attention back to the movie, but she can't focus on what's happening on the screen because her mind is now occupied with this observation, with a small detail that somehow feels significant. She wonders what he's looking at that's so entertaining, what could possibly be more interesting than the time they're supposed to be spending together. She wonders if it's work, if it's news, if it's something else entirely. She wonders why he's never this entertained when he's with her. The next evening, she makes a point of paying attention again, and sure enough, the same thing happens. They're having dinner together, and at one point he pulls his phone out of his pocket and sets it on the table next to his plate. She knows he's not supposed to have his phone out during dinner. They made that rule together years ago, a commitment to be present with each other during meals. But he's made an exception, and she watches as he glances down at his phone, his face immediately transforming as he sees whatever notification has just come through. His smile is immediate and involuntary, and he's typing something back with one hand while holding his fork in the other. She asks him who he's texting, keeping her voice casual and light, trying not to sound accusatory or suspicious. He barely glances up from his phone as he tells her it's work, that someone sent him something about a project. But his response is too quick, too rehearsed, and the smile hasn't faded from his face even after he's answered her question. She knows he's lying, or at least not telling her the complete truth. She knows because she knows him, because she's been married to him for 12 years, because she can read the micro-expressions on his face the way other people read books. She can see the guilt flicker across his features for just a moment before he masks it with his practiced explanation about work. This pattern continues over the next few weeks, with small moments throughout the day where he'll check his phone and smile at something she's not allowed to see. They'll be in the car, and he'll laugh at his phone while they're stopped at a red light. They'll be at a restaurant, and his face will light up when he gets a notification. They'll be in bed together, and she'll catch him grinning in the dark at something illuminated on his screen. Each time, the smile is genuine and unguarded. Each time it's clear that whatever he's seeing is bringing him genuine joy and amusement. And each time, she feels a small stab of hurt, wondering why he can't smile at her that way anymore. She tries to engage him more, tries to be more entertaining, tries to be the thing that makes him smile the way his phone does. She tries to be funny, cracking jokes at dinner to see if she can get that smile to appear on his face. Sometimes it works, but it never feels the same. The smile is polite, obligatory, a performance he's putting on for her rather than a genuine reaction to something she said. She tries to be flirty, touching his arm during conversation, leaning in close when they're walking together, trying to remind him of the physical attraction they used to have for each other. Sometimes he responds, but it feels mechanical, like he's following a script rather than actually connecting with her. She decides to do something she's been considering for weeks. She decides to look at his phone. She knows it's a violation of his privacy, knows it's crossing a line that she swore she would never cross in her marriage, but the need to know what's making him smile, what's pulling his attention away from her, is overwhelming. One afternoon while he's in the shower, she finds his phone on the nightstand and picks it up with trembling hands. She tries the standard passcodes, their anniversary, their wedding date, his birthday, but none of them work. The phone is locked behind a security code that she doesn't know, a code he's clearly set up specifically to keep her out. The fact that he has a password on his phone, something he never had before, confirms her suspicion that he's definitely hiding something. She sits on the edge of their bed holding his phone, feeling a mixture of anger and hurt and desperate need to know what's inside. She could confront him about the password, could ask him directly what he's hiding. But something stops her, some instinct that tells her that if she accuses him before she has proof, he'll just deny it and lock himself down even further. She puts the phone back exactly where she found it and spends the rest of the afternoon feeling sick. She starts doing things she never thought she would do. She follows him sometimes when he leaves work, keeping her distance, watching where he goes. She checks their credit card statements looking for unusual charges, looking for evidence of him spending money on someone or something he's hiding from her. She goes through their car looking for receipts that might give her a clue about what's happening. She feels like a detective, like she's investigating a crime. And in a way, she supposes she is, the crime of her marriage falling apart and her husband keeping secrets from her. One afternoon, she follows him and watches as he drives to a coffee shop downtown, a place she's never heard him mention before. She watches him park his car and go inside, and after a few minutes of deliberation, she goes in herself, keeping her distance, positioning herself at a table where she can see him without being obvious about it. She watches as he sits down at a corner table with his laptop, and within minutes, someone joins him. Her heart stops in her chest as she realizes it's a woman, someone she's never seen before, someone young and attractive with long dark hair and a bright smile on her face. She watches as her husband's face transforms when he sees this woman, watches as that smile, the smile that used to be reserved for her, the smile that she's been desperately trying to coax out of him, appears on his face. He stands up and hugs the woman, and the hug lasts longer than a friendly greeting would warrant. They sit down together at the coffee shop table, and he's animated in a way she hasn't seen him in years, gesturing as he talks, leaning forward with genuine interest in what the woman is saying. The woman reaches across the table and touches his arm, and he doesn't pull away. He laughs at something she says, and it's that laugh, that genuine, unguarded laugh that he's been directing at his phone all these weeks. She feels like she can't breathe, like someone has reached into her chest and is squeezing her heart. She watches for another 30 minutes as they sit together, talking and laughing and occasionally touching each other's arms or hands. She watches as he pulls out his phone and shows her something, and they both laugh at whatever is on the screen. She watches as they exchange what looks like a significant look, a moment of connection that feels intimate in a way that goes beyond friendship. She watches as the woman leans in close to him and whispers something in his ear, and he blushes and looks down, smiling shyly in a way that she hasn't seen him smile in years. She can't watch anymore. She leaves the coffee shop feeling numb and shattered, feeling like her entire world has collapsed. She drives home in a daze, not really paying attention to the road, just focused on the fact that her husband is having an affair. She doesn't know how long it's been going on, doesn't know if it's purely emotional or if it's physical, doesn't know what this means for their marriage. What she does know is that he's smiling at another woman the way he used to smile at her, and that realization is more painful than anything she's ever experienced. She waits for him to come home, and when he arrives, she can barely look at him. She can see the evidence of his affair written all over him. The way he moves is different. The way he carries himself is different. There's a lightness to him that wasn't there this morning. She realizes that he's been happy these past few weeks, that whatever is happening with this other woman has been making him happy in a way that she hasn't been able to make him happy in a long time. She wonders if he's fallen in love with this other woman, if he's planning to leave her, if this is the beginning of the end of their marriage. That night, she confronts him. She tells him that she followed him to the coffee shop, that she saw him with a woman, that she knows he's been hiding something on his phone. She watches as his face goes pale, as panic flashes across his features, as he realizes that his secret has been discovered. He tries to deny it at first, tries to tell her that it wasn't what it looked like, that she's misunderstanding the situation. But she's not having it. She tells him that she saw them together, that she saw how he smiled at her, that she knows he's having an affair. He sits down heavily on the couch, and for a long moment, he says nothing. She can see him struggling with how to respond, struggling with the weight of what's about to come out. And then he does something unexpected. He starts to cry. Not tears of guilt or remorse, but tears that seem to come from a place of relief, like he's been carrying this burden alone for so long that finally being confronted with it is almost a relief. He tells her that she's right, that he has been hiding something, that there is a woman involved in the story. But then he says something that completely changes everything. Her name is Sarah, and she's my sister. She stands completely frozen, unable to process what she's just heard. She asks him to repeat himself, thinking she's misunderstood, thinking that maybe she heard him wrong. He tells her again. Sarah is his sister, his half-sister to be specific. He tells her that he found out 6 months ago that he has a sister that he never knew about, that their father had an affair before he was even born, that Sarah is the result of that affair. He tells her that when Sarah found him on social media and reached out to him, he was shocked but also intrigued. He tells her that they've been meeting in secret because he didn't know how to tell her, because he was ashamed of his father's infidelity, because he was struggling with this new information about his family. She feels the anger drain out of her, replaced by confusion and hurt. She asks him why he didn't just tell her, why he felt the need to keep this secret, why he couldn't have been honest with her from the beginning. He tells her that he was ashamed, that he felt like his father's actions somehow reflected on him, that he didn't know how to explain the situation without her judging him or his father. He tells her that he's been trying to figure out how to tell her, how to introduce Sarah into their lives, how to handle this complicated family situation. He tells her that the smiling at his phone was Sarah sending him memes and funny videos, that the coffee shop meetings were him getting to know his sister, that none of it was romantic or inappropriate. She listens to his explanation with a mixture of relief and anger and hurt. Relief that there's no affair, that his distance hasn't been about another woman, that their marriage isn't ending. But anger and hurt that he didn't trust her enough to be honest with her from the beginning, that he felt the need to sneak around and hide things instead of just sitting down and having a conversation about what was happening. She tells him that she's not angry about Sarah, that she's not angry about his half-sister existing, but she is angry about the deception, about being shut out, about having to follow him to a coffee shop to discover what he was hiding. He apologizes profusely, telling her that he knows he was wrong to keep this from her, that he should have trusted her, that he should have been honest about what he was going through. He tells her that he was struggling with the news of having a half-sister, that he was trying to process it on his own before bringing her into the situation, that he was afraid of burdening her with what he saw as his problem. She listens to his apology and tells him that she forgives him, but that going forward, there can't be any more secrets, that they need to be honest with each other about what's happening in their lives, even when it's complicated or messy or uncomfortable. He agrees, and the next day, he tells her everything about Sarah. He tells her how Sarah reached out to him through a genealogy website, how she'd been searching for her biological father for years, how she discovered that his father was her father too. He tells her that Sarah grew up not knowing who her father was, that her mother never told her, that she spent her whole life wondering about her biological family. He tells her that when Sarah found him, she was terrified that he would reject her, that she was just hoping for some kind of connection to her biological family, even if it was just a half-brother she'd never met before. He shows her photos of Sarah, and she can immediately see the resemblance. They have the same nose, the same eye shape, something about their smile is identical. She feels her anger soften as she realizes that this is a person who is genuinely his sister, who shares his DNA, who has probably been searching for family connections her entire life. She asks him what he wants to do about this situation, what he envisions happening going forward. He tells her that he wants to introduce Sarah to the family, that he wants to help her meet their father if that's something Sarah wants, that he wants her to be part of their lives. He tells her that he knows it's complicated and messy, but that he feels responsible for Sarah in a way he can't quite explain. She tells him that she thinks they should meet Sarah properly, that they should invite her to dinner and get to know her as a person rather than just as a secret. She tells him that she's not angry about Sarah existing, that she's actually very interested in hearing Sarah's story, that she thinks it would be good for him to have a sister. She tells him that what she was angry about was the deception and the secrets, but that now that everything is out in the open, she's willing to embrace this new family dynamic. She watches as relief floods his face, as he realizes that she's not going to leave him over this, that she's willing to support him through this complicated situation. A week later, they invite Sarah over for dinner. She spends the entire day preparing, cleaning the house obsessively, cooking Sarah's favorite foods even though she doesn't know what those are yet, changing her outfit 3 times because she wants to make a good first impression on this woman who is apparently her half-sister-in-law. She's nervous in a way she hasn't been in years, worried about saying the wrong thing, worried about making Sarah feel uncomfortable, worried about this new dynamic and how it will change their lives. Her husband notices her anxiety and keeps telling her to relax, that Sarah is just a person, that there's no need to be so formal about this. But she can tell that he's nervous too, that he's worried about how his wife and his sister will get along. When Sarah arrives at their door, she's nervous too, clearly unsure of how she'll be received by her half-brother's wife. But she's also genuine and warm and funny, and as the evening progresses, they find themselves laughing together and sharing stories. Sarah tells them about her life, about growing up without knowing her biological father, about the search that led her to her half-brother. She talks about how scary it was to reach out, how terrified she was that he would reject her, how grateful she is that he didn't. She talks about how meeting her half-brother has filled a void in her life that she didn't even know was there. Sarah shares stories from her childhood, stories about growing up with a single mother who always seemed sad and distant, about wondering why she didn't have a father like other kids, about spending years thinking that something was wrong with her, that there was a reason her father abandoned her before she was even born. She talks about the moment she found the genealogy results, about how her hands were shaking when she discovered who her biological father was, about the terrifying process of reaching out to her half-brother and waiting to see if he would respond. She talks about the relief and joy when he actually answered, when he agreed to meet her, when he didn't reject her the way she'd been so afraid he would. She finds herself developing genuine affection for Sarah over the course of the evening. She sees how much Sarah and her husband have in common, how they share the same mannerisms and sense of humor, how there's an immediate bond between them despite never having met before. She sees how happy her husband is when he's with Sarah, how that smile that used to worry her so much is now a beautiful thing to witness. She realizes that what she was seeing on his face those weeks when he was smiling at his phone wasn't the smile of someone falling in love with another woman. It was the smile of someone discovering family, of someone connecting with a part of himself he didn't know was missing. By the end of the evening, the three of them are sitting on the couch together, and Sarah has her head on her half-brother's shoulder while they watch a movie, looking completely comfortable and at ease. She watches the scene and feels tears forming in her eyes. Not tears of hurt or jealousy anymore, but tears of joy at witnessing the healing that's happening in front of her. She sees her husband's face as he watches the movie, and she sees that he's genuinely happy in a way that she hasn't seen in a very long time. She sees a man who has been given a gift, the gift of family, of connection, of belonging, and she realizes how important it was for her to push through her hurt and anger to allow this to happen. Over the following months, Sarah becomes a regular part of their lives. She comes over for dinners. She joins them for weekend outings. She becomes integrated into their social circle. They help her navigate her work challenges. They celebrate her victories. They become invested in her life in the way that family does. She watches as Sarah gradually becomes more comfortable in their home, as she stops being nervous about fitting in and starts acting like she actually belongs there. She watches as Sarah slowly opens up about her trauma, about the abandonment she felt, about the confusion of not knowing who she was, about the identity crisis that came from not having a father. One evening, Sarah breaks down in tears while they're all having dinner together. She talks about how hard it's been to feel like she didn't matter enough for her father to stick around, about the years of therapy she's been in dealing with abandonment issues, about how finding her half-brother has helped her understand that it wasn't about her, that it was about their father's inability to handle his responsibilities. She talks about how for years she internalized the abandonment as a reflection of her own worth, thinking that if she'd been a better daughter or a better person, maybe her father would have stayed. She talks about how meeting her half-brother and seeing him struggle with similar issues of perfectionism and self-doubt has helped her understand that these are family patterns, not personal failings. Her husband listens to Sarah with visible emotion, and she watches as he opens up to Sarah as well, telling her about his own struggles with perfectionism, about his own fear of disappointing people, about his own complicated relationship with their father. He tells Sarah that their father has always been difficult, always demanding, always making him feel like he had to be perfect to be worthy of love. He tells Sarah that he thinks their father's infidelity was probably rooted in his own insecurities and his own inability to face consequences. He tells Sarah that he's realized through therapy that a lot of his own issues come from trying to live up to impossible standards set by their father. She listens to this conversation and realizes that her husband has been carrying a lot of pain related to his father all these years, pain that she wasn't fully aware of because he'd never talked about it in such depth. She realizes that having Sarah in his life is helping him process some of these deep family wounds, that having someone to share the experience of having a difficult father with is therapeutic in a way that nothing else could be. She feels grateful that Sarah came into their lives, grateful that her initial hurt and suspicion led to this moment where healing can happen on multiple levels. She decides that they should all go to therapy together, not because anything is wrong, but because they all have complicated family histories and they could benefit from working through them together with professional support. She suggests it one evening, and to her surprise, both her husband and Sarah are immediately on board. They find a family therapist who specializes in complex family dynamics and abandonment issues, and they start meeting together once a week. In these sessions, they talk about their feelings about their father, about the impact of his absence, about the ways that his infidelity and abandonment have affected all of them in different ways. In one particularly emotional session, the therapist asks their father to join them. Their father is hesitant at first, clearly uncomfortable with being put on the spot like this, but he agrees to come to one session. The session is uncomfortable and painful, with Sarah expressing her anger and hurt about being abandoned, with her husband expressing his frustration about having to deal with the emotional fallout of his father's infidelity, with him asking his father why he never just took responsibility for his actions. Their father sits in that chair looking like he's being physically attacked, looking like he wants to run away and hide. But then their father does something unexpected. He breaks down. He tells them that he's been ashamed of himself for years, that he knows he's failed them both in fundamental ways. He tells them that he was young and irresponsible when he got Sarah's mother pregnant, that he didn't know how to handle the responsibility, that he made the cowardly choice to pretend it didn't happen instead of facing it head-on. He tells his son that he's sorry for modeling such poor behavior, for showing him through example that it's okay to keep secrets and avoid responsibility. He tells Sarah that he's sorry for abandoning her, that he has no excuse for the pain his absence caused her, that he should have been a father to her. The conversation doesn't fix everything. 12 years of abandonment can't be erased by an apology in a therapist's office. But it's a beginning. It's a start to repairing some of the damage that was done. And more importantly, it gives them all a chance to be heard, to express their pain and their anger in a safe container where they don't have to worry about the other person leaving. Over time, a new family dynamic emerges. Sarah becomes close to her biological father, not in the way she would have been if he'd been present from the beginning, but in a way that's real and intentional and based on genuine effort from both sides. Sarah also becomes increasingly close to her half-brother and his wife, to the point where she's practically part of their household. They help her navigate life transitions, career changes, relationship challenges, personal growth, and she helps them with various projects and emotional support. They become genuinely invested in each other's well-being in the way that real family is. They become the family that Sarah was searching for all those years, and in the process, her husband's life becomes richer and more connected. Meanwhile, she notices significant changes in her husband as a result of all this family work. He becomes more open, more willing to share his feelings and fears with her. He starts initiating conversations about things that are bothering him rather than hiding them. He tells her about his struggles with perfectionism, about his fear of disappointing people, about the ways that his past has shaped his present behavior. He becomes more emotionally available, more present in their relationship, more willing to be vulnerable with her. The distance that had been growing between them begins to close, replaced by a deeper sense of connection and understanding. She also starts her own individual therapy to process her experience of discovering her husband's secret, to explore her own abandonment fears that were triggered by thinking he was having an affair. She works with her therapist on understanding why her mind went to infidelity so quickly, why she was so quick to assume the worst, why she has such a difficult time trusting people she loves. She discovers that she has her own family trauma around abandonment and infidelity. Her own father had an affair when she was a teenager, something that had deeply affected her trust in relationships. She realizes that her husband's behavior, whether or not it involved actual infidelity, triggered all of her old wounds. In her therapy sessions, she works on separating her past from her present, on learning to trust her husband even when her anxiety is telling her to be suspicious, on developing a more secure attachment style. She learns that her investigation and confrontation, while they came from a place of pain, were actually a form of taking control in a situation where she felt powerless. She learns that she could have chosen different ways to address her concerns, ways that didn't involve sneaking around and following him. She learns to communicate her needs more directly and to ask for reassurance when she needs it rather than trying to gather evidence to confirm her worst fears. Over the course of a year, both of them do significant personal work through therapy. They attend couples therapy together where they work specifically on rebuilding trust and communication in their relationship. They learn new skills for having difficult conversations, for expressing needs and boundaries, for listening to each other with compassion and without defensiveness. They practice vulnerability in controlled settings with their therapist's guidance, gradually learning to be more open and honest with each other about their fears and insecurities. One day, Sarah brings her own boyfriend to dinner, and the four of them sit around the table together like an actual family. She watches as her husband looks around the table at the people he loves, at his wife and his sister and Sarah's boyfriend, and she sees that smile, the smile that started this whole journey, the smile that made her suspicious and hurt and angry. But now she understands what that smile means. It's not the smile of someone being unfaithful or deceptive. It's the smile of someone who is genuinely happy, who is surrounded by people he loves, who is connected to family in a way that's real and meaningful and true. She watches as Sarah and her boyfriend interact with genuine affection, and she's struck by how healthy their relationship looks. She watches as her husband and Sarah banter back and forth like siblings who've known each other their whole lives, not like half-siblings who only just met a year ago. She watches as the boyfriend asks her husband questions about the family, tries to understand the dynamics, makes an effort to fit into this new family unit. She realizes that this is what family actually looks like. Not some perfect nuclear family without complications, but people who care about each other enough to work through the complicated stuff together. After Sarah and her boyfriend leave that night, her husband pulls her close and tells her that he loves her, that he's grateful for her, that he doesn't know what would have happened to his relationship with Sarah if she hadn't confronted him that night. He tells her that if he continued keeping Sarah a secret, he probably would have felt like he had to choose between his wife and his sister, that he probably would have eventually resented her for not knowing the truth. He tells her that her confrontation, as painful as it was, actually forced him to be honest, forced him to integrate the different parts of his life, forced him to build a relationship with his sister that was authentic and real rather than secretive and compartmentalized. She tells him that she's grateful too, grateful for the journey they've been on, grateful for the work they've both done in therapy, grateful for Sarah coming into their lives. She tells him that what started as a moment of jealousy and suspicion has transformed into something beautiful, into a deeper relationship between the two of them, into a new sister in the family, into healing for multiple generations of family trauma. She tells him that she's learned that sometimes the things we're most afraid of are actually opportunities for growth and transformation if we're willing to face them head-on. She realizes that the phone smiling that worried her so much was actually the beginning of her husband reconnecting with a part of himself, with a part of his family that he didn't know was missing. She realizes that what she interpreted as distance or infidelity was actually her husband struggling to process complex emotions and family dynamics that he didn't know how to handle. She realizes that the confrontation, while it came from a place of pain and suspicion, ultimately led to something beautiful, to honesty, to vulnerability, to a deeper and more authentic connection in their relationship. Years pass, and they continue to deepen their relationships with Sarah and with each other. They take vacations together as a family of 3. They celebrate holidays together. They support each other through life's challenges. Sarah eventually gets married, and her half-brother walks her down the aisle, an honor that means everything to both of them. She watches this moment with tears streaming down her face, thinking about how this moment might never have happened if her husband had never been honest about his sister, if she'd never followed him to that coffee shop, if they'd never had the confrontation that started it all. She thinks back to that moment when she first noticed him smiling at his phone, when she felt that stab of hurt and jealousy, when she wondered what could possibly be more interesting or entertaining than her. She thinks about how that observation led her down a path of investigation and suspicion that, while uncomfortable, ultimately revealed something important about their relationship, that they needed to be more honest with each other, that they needed to be more vulnerable, that they needed to stop hiding things and start trusting each other with our whole selves, including the messy and complicated parts. She watches her husband now, years later, and she sees a man who is more present, more engaged, more genuinely happy than he was before. She sees a man who has learned to embrace the complexity of his family, who has learned to be honest about his struggles, who has learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, but rather the foundation of real connection. She sees a man who smiles at his phone when his sister sends him funny videos, but who also smiles at her, who also laughs at her jokes, who also finds joy and connection in their relationship. And she realizes that the phone smiling that started this whole journey wasn't actually the problem. The problem was the secrecy, the dishonesty, the belief that he had to handle everything alone. The solution was to talk about it, to be honest, to be vulnerable, to trust her with the messy parts of his life. And now that they've done that, now that they've built a relationship based on genuine honesty and trust, the phone smiling is just a small part of a life that's filled with genuine connection and authentic joy. She understands now that what started as suspicion and ended in confrontation was actually the beginning of the deepest healing her marriage has ever experienced, and she wouldn't change a single moment of that journey if she could.